Welcome to today's Explainer. We're about to take a seriously fascinating journey inward. We're decoding one of astrology's absolute most sensitive, profound placements, the moon in the fourth house. Now, through our deep dive today, we're going to break down exactly what it means to find home. And actually, scratch that. We're not talking about a physical address with a front door or a roof. We're talking about an internal sanctuary. We'll explore how this specific placement heavily influences our deepest need for safety. And maybe more importantly, we'll map out how to outgrow the emotional dependencies that can kind of hold us back from true resilience. So, let's get into it.
Now, what's really interesting about this is that it presents a profound, honestly almost confronting challenge right out of the gate. Seriously, take a second to ask yourself, can your inner peace survive when life becomes uncomfortable? Man, it's a heavy question, right? For someone navigating the energy of this moon placement, their entire world is often, consciously or subconsciously, built completely around maintaining emotional security. So what happens when that security is threatened by the literal unpredictability of life? That right there is the emotional stake of our exploration today. It's the core mystery we're going to unravel.
Section 1. Home is a feeling.
Okay, so to truly understand the nuts and bolts of this placement, we've got to start at the beginning and look at its comforting setup. We need to see how it establishes this deep, baseline, almost primal desire for safety. And this brilliantly illustrates how combining two distinct forces creates something completely new. First, you've got the fourth house. This governs your literal home, your family ties, your childhood, and that completely hidden inner world you barely show to anyone. Then you mix in the moon, a celestial body that's all about our fluctuating emotions, our intuition, and our deepest, most vulnerable need for nurturing. When you fuse these two together, boom, you create a personality that fiercely longs for emotional stability, someone constantly looking for a reliable, rock-solid place where their heart can just rest. Because of this incredible fusion, people with this placement naturally build their lives around these core themes. And you can see how intertwined these pillars are, right? Like physical spaces tied directly into emotional security. Memories feed right into that hidden inner world. Because of this, these folks are absolute masters at curating their environments. They naturally craft physical spaces that feel incredibly warm, welcoming, and safe. To them, home isn't a building, it is a feeling. A peaceful environment absolutely dictates their daily emotional well-being, which makes having trusted relationships and familiar places feel literally essential to their survival.
All right, let's dive into Section 2, the comfort trap.
So here's where our story gets a bit complicated. We need to talk about a really fascinating disruption. What happens when that cozy, amazing comfort we just talked about slowly morphs into an invisible trap? This quote hits the nail on the head. Comfort can slowly become an emotional dependency. I really want you to let that sink in. We all know the vibe. You're wrapped up in a cozy blanket on a rainy day, and there's absolutely no way you're going out for groceries because it's just too comfy. And hey, comfort is absolutely not a bad thing. We all need rest, belonging, and support to function. But the challenge starts when comfort becomes the only environment where you can experience peace. Building your whole life entirely around familiar places and heavily trusted relationships, it actually creates a super fragile reality. Over time, your heart starts believing a dangerous little lie, that you can only be at peace when everything around you is perfectly recognizable and unchanging.
So the crucial point is this. Life changes. Homes change. Relationships evolve. Loved ones leave. Honestly, circumstances shifting is the one absolute guarantee we get in life. If your emotional stability is 100% dependent on external conditions staying exactly the same, well, your inner peace is incredibly vulnerable. The second life inevitably shifts, and it will, anxiety quietly moves right in. Without internal resilience, a simple external change doesn't just feel like a new chapter. It feels like a devastating, deeply personal loss.
Section 3. Roots and Emotional Habits. Let's wander into the inner labyrinth for a minute. We need to look at how our earliest memories and those invisible emotional patterns quietly dictate our adult reactions. The source material makes it super clear. Childhood shapes this placement more than almost any other, and looking at these two types of memories shows us exactly how. Loving memories, they're fantastic. They serve as these lasting emotional anchors that give us lifelong comfort. But difficult memories are just as powerful, if not more so. They leave these deep impressions and wounds that we subconsciously try to fix later on. The emotional atmosphere you grew up in literally creates an invisible template. So without even realizing it, you might be out there in adulthood, constantly searching for the exact same feelings you once knew, just repeating cycles because, well, they feel familiar.
Let's move to and see how this builds into a really practical roadmap for change. Since the moon governs our habits, our emotional reactions usually happen automatically, long before logic even shows up to the party. Step 1 is the trigger. Maybe it's a tough conversation or a sudden uncertainty. Step 2 is the automatic reaction, usually fear, withdrawing, or running back to a familiar comfort. And these feel totally natural because you've practiced them for years. But here's the absolute best news. Emotional habits aren't permanent. Step 3, awareness. That is your superpower. Just recognizing the pattern in the moment gives you the mental breathing room for step 4, choosing a healthier, totally new response. The more you understand your patterns, the less power they have to quietly run your life.
Section 4, the empathy dilemma.
Which brings us to the double-edged sword of this placement. We're talking about the intense tension between a truly beautiful capacity to care for others and the absolutely exhausting reality of self-neglect. I want to validate right now that this profound empathy is an incredible gift. Because you feel things so deeply, you instantly get other people's pain. You naturally care for your people, and creating safety for loved ones is one of your biggest strengths. But the flip side? Caring for everyone else so intensely often means your own emotional needs get completely pushed to the side. Being a 24/7 safe harbor for others without taking time to heal yourself, that leads straight to burnout. You literally cannot pour from an empty cup indefinitely. I want to pause here for a second. Just let this breathe. Emotional resilience grows most during uncertainty rather than stability. The fourth house naturally wants to pull inward, and yes, quiet evenings and peaceful solitude are absolutely crucial to recharge. But our deepest healing, like real fundamental growth, that usually kicks off when life temporarily strips away our familiar comforts. It's those messy, uncertain seasons that force you to tap into internal strengths you'd never even use during the peaceful times.
Section 5, building lasting inner peace.
All right, we've reached the climax of our explainer. Let's talk about the ultimate resolution, letting go of the past to build an unbreakable inner peace. Look, nostalgia can feel like a warm hug because it preserves those familiar, fuzzy emotions. But we gotta gently admit that nostalgia can also be a massive trap. Your memories absolutely deserve respect. They're your story. But if you carry every single old wound and set up camp in the past, you leave literally zero room in your heart for new joy. Healing doesn't mean erasing your memories or pretending they didn't happen. It just means changing your relationship with them. The past stays part of your story, but it completely loses the power to dictate your future chapters.
When you stack these two states of being against each other, the way forward is pretty obvious. Fragile peace, it is so exhausting to maintain because it relies entirely on things you can't control. Familiar places, perfect homes, predictable people. But lasting peace, that's the real deal. It grows quietly inside you. You cultivate it through self-understanding, radical acceptance, and resilience. When external comfort shifts from being an absolute survival requirement to just something you appreciate when it's there, everything changes. Your heart finally learns that safety can exist even in massive uncertainty, and true quiet confidence replaces all that fear.
As we wrap up our explainer today, I want to leave you with a lingering, kind of provocative thought to chew on. Can you carry your sense of home wherever life leads? Ultimately, that is the masterclass this placement is trying to teach. Life is never, ever going to be completely predictable. Seasons will change, homes will change, relationships will shift, and your emotions are naturally going to rise and fall. But true emotional security, it's an internal sanctuary that literally no external change can ever touch. It's the quiet, solid confidence that your sense of home is built right there, inside you. And when comfort finally becomes a choice instead of a desperate necessity, that's when you discover a true peace that is entirely your own.